I finally did it. A couple of years back, uh, when you started getting into F1, we made a promise to each other, right? And that was that we would give each other a homework assignment and we would watch it. And you said, you got to watch F1 Drive to Survive. I waited till now to do it. And I told you, you have to watch I Think You Should Leave. And I think you checked out an episode or so. So
Mm.
we're copacetic at this
I'll
point.
watch the next season. Don't worry.
Keep kicking that can down the road. Yeah, so I threw on F1 Drive to Survive, and I was like, oh, I thought this was just like the first couple episodes. Maybe we'll get some more as things
Season
go
4.
on. Season 4, no, just completely dropped on March 11th, and I was like, I'll skip around on this. Nope, sucked me right in. Binged the whole thing on the weekend. I have a lot of thoughts about it, but mostly just how the hell is anyone a Red Bull and Max Verstappen fan? That's where I gotta start with this, dude. Fuck that guy. Fuck that team.
Leave the comments. The Dutch are mad, but I don't care. Yeah, this is I'm glad to see that you watched, and I think presents an interesting perspective because you do not watch Formula One and you just watch all of Drive to Survive. This has largely been, and I recently last year was in your boat. However, after watching Drive to Survive seasons 1 through 3, I became a Formula One fan and watched the entire season. Now, purists, longtime Formula One fans, have, mixed thoughts on Drive to Survive fans, as we are called. However, it's definitely boosting the popularity of the sport in North America. Ratings were up like 40% in the US in 2021. You really can't deny that. They just added a second race in Miami coming up in May. But I think like it's just hard to deny that this kind of documentary series about a sport, individual athletes, probably specifically, is just super compelling when you have all the narrative, drama, and personalities that a sport like Formula One has. And I really just hats off, I think, to Box to Box Films, the production company that has made this series, because it's just really ripe for this kind of treatment. And Box to Box Films is now also developing a similar series for golf and tennis, which I think both also fit this well. But the world of Formula One, I think, is just really cool to see portrayed this way. And I have a unique relationship to the season 4 because now that I've seen the season or the season of sport already, I just keep looking at like stuff that was left out because I already know the story. So to me, it wasn't quite as gripping as it was the first time around when I watched seasons 1 through 3 when I didn't know anything. But I still think it's really cool to just kind of like see that behind the scenes and get all those confessionals and everything. So why do you think season 4? Why did it bring you in as someone who had not been paying attention to F1?
I mean, I was watching this like basically just like a reality TV show. It has the elements of
Yeah.
a really good one, which is there's built-in inherent drama between all of these teams, and uh, you know, uh, Verstappen and Lewis and the Toto and the
Horner.
Red Bull guy, yeah, Horner. Like there's just so much like built-in drama right there, just in this chase between these two teams. Um, I think the series obviously thrives the most when it's focusing on the drama between them, and I think it naturally kind of divides people. These two teams, which is also obviously great. It's like the Red Sox and Yankees, or
Oh my god.
any of those great rivalries.
Social media was a fucking wasteland last season between Mercedes and Red Bull fans.
I can only imagine. But you know what was really great about it was, if you were coming just to see some amazing scenery of Europe, it's a great travel documentary. The way it's shot, it's absolutely gorgeous when they're going around. What was it, Monaco?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, one of the most beautiful like scenes, just driving around with I forgot which driver it is, but
Yeah, Leclerc and Sainz, the Ferrari boys driving around.
Yeah.
Leclerc's like, "Hey, there's my first school."
yeah, just incredible stuff. that you see them like going out in the water at times and
Mhm.
just like making fun of rich people who can't afford huge yachts and just have like regular size sailboats there. Just amazing stuff. And then I think what is interesting if you're a sports fan
Yeah.
is the strategy of like team building and like how you like I think putting yourself in the shoes of like the teammates who aren't at the top, someone like the second car for Mercedes,
Yeah.
Vatlari,
Bottas. Yeah.
yeah,
Valtteri Bottas and
Valtteri,
George
yeah,
Russell, who they going to pick for Lewis's teammate next year.
so much so much built in just drama and really like thoughtful stuff that if you're a sport fan I think makes sense. If you're watching just to kind of enjoy drama in general makes sense.
Mm.
And then obviously the ending is just totally polarizing. I do have to say, as someone who's not a F1 fan, I was all in until the very end. I felt like that decision in some way kind of like marred the outcome of the season for me.
Mm.
Very controversial. And in talking to you, seems like it wasn't just me who saw it that way. And I was a little bit disappointed and felt like it feels a bit like the intervention of the judge there. Was it
Yeah.
Massey or
Michael Massey, the race director. Yeah.
and then his dismissiveness to Toto afterwards just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Kind of like it feels
Yeah.
like Verstappen didn't actually win this, So
I know.
tough overall ending, but really really fun season to follow.
Yeah. And that's the thing is this is the first season in a long time where there's been a genuine title fight, literally down to the final race, tied in points for the drivers' championship. Um, I think that's why there was so much hype about this season of Drive to Survive, because in the past, this whole turbo hybrid era has just been dominated by Mercedes and dominated by Lewis. So to have someone actually challenge and push Lewis, and obviously Max shouldn't have actually won, but he almost won, and he's, you know, worthy of winning under normal circumstances. Obviously, the proof is in the racing. He won 10 times last year, but this season Drive to Survive actually has even more of a focus, I think, on the Mercedes versus Red Bull of it all, because it was such a dominating force in the season, especially at the end. And that's actually where I was a little disappointed, because I thought there's just so much meat on the bone, things they left out. They kind of skip over some of like the early like Mercedes coming back and Lewis kind of like chopping down Max's lead, and we pick it back up in Saudi Arabia, the second to last race, where there's more controversy between them, crashing, and then of course in Abu Dhabi at the end there. So like I couldn't help but just be disappointed that we didn't see the Brazil stuff at Interlagos portrayed, where like because that's like something like when it happened in real life, I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing in the Netflix show, where Lewis gets dinged for like a regulation thing with his car, and he has a hard penalty and the engine penalty on top of that. Sprint race format, he has to he makes up like 15 spots for qualifying, and he still wins the race when they actually do the race. It was a crazy thing. Where at the time we thought like Lewis's title shots are probably done. There's no way he can win this race. He needs to win this race, and he wins the race. And they just completely gloss over it. And they're like, and Lewis wins at Brazil. It's like there was so much about Lewis winning at Brazil that just isn't on this series. And I thought that would have been really cool to show people that uh, didn't see it happen when it happened. But
Yeah.
was there anything like outside of Lewis versus Max of the season that stood out to you? You mentioned the Mercedes deciding who to pair with Lewis, Russell or Bottas. You mentioned that. Anything else stand out?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff with Botas. I mean, it just feels like he's a driver who, if he's on any other team, could be a number one easily, and
Yeah,
potentially
exactly.
pushing for wins. So it's a little tough to see them pick George over them. But I guess it's kind of similar to like a MLB team picking
Yeah,
a prospect over a vet kind of thing. I
yeah.
don't know.
A
I don't
lot
know
of
if I
hype.
agree with the decision.
Mhm. I I think it was the right call. There's a lot of hype for George this year. George won F3 and won F2 in his first seasons there. He's considered like one of the best, if not the best, of this young crop of guys. He just hasn't been in a Ferrari like Leclerc. He's been stuck at Williams during a really bad time at Williams. So we'll see, and I think they reminded you of how he did at when he filled in for Lewis in 2020 when Lewis had COVID. Like the talent's there. But yeah, it's hard not to feel bad for Botas, who's been in Lewis's shadow the whole time, and has to do the team order stuff, which they reiterated once again. It's just like now the thing is they didn't even mention this in the season. He's at Alfa Romeo now. He got a new gig, and he's
Yeah,
number one, and he has a multi-year deal for the first time. He had been on 1 year deals every year at Mercedes. I wish that we had more time and they could have glossed over that, because Bottas seems like super at peace coming into this year about being at Alpha, even though Alpha is a significantly worse team and less competitive team than Mercedes. And
gotcha.
we just didn't get that, And
Yep.
in past seasons, they would talk about like what happened to people. Like they had Alex Albon episode at the end. Like Alex lost his seat for 2021. Like we didn't have any of that kind of stuff this year. I thought that was kind of odd, but they didn't mention who replaced George at Williams, which is Albon coming back. Like um, stuff like that. I thought it was a little strange, just because like if you want to tell the story of the season, I think there's just a lot of stuff that should be told. Like this series, you probably didn't even notice, but there were two teams that are just not in this season. There's
I
Alfa
had no
Romeo.
idea.
Alfa Romeo's not there, which is particularly notable because Kimi Räikkönen retired this year, the longest running racer ever. He had the most starts ever, former world champion. He retired. I understand why they didn't have it in the series, because he hates talking to the press. He hates doing all that shit. So I get it. But also, Aston Martin is not there at all. You see Vettel like for a split second, but like this is leaving out two teams, I guess, because there's not really much of a narrative to try and weave into the season. I guess I understand it. You know, we get a lot of time with Yuki Tsunoda, which I thought was pretty
Yep.
cool, because I think he has a specific story. Obviously, coming from Japan as a rookie, having like a bit of a culture shock, and like I think they did a good job of like explaining like they had to move him basically from England to Italy to get better performance out of him and just make him more professional,
Yep.
which is what people were saying at the time, and it bore out, and his results got better. Did you like the Yuki stuff?
I thought that was interesting. Honestly, I think just based on where I was at in my binge that day, I was kind of
Yeah.
fading on it a little bit. But also, I think I was kind of at that point expecting to hear something from Verstappen. I kind of
Yes.
thought I was
Right.
going to hear him, get his own episode, and it just never happened. He just didn't want to be on the show.
He did not want to be on the show. He thinks it twists narratives and isn't real and stuff. And obviously, they spin a story on Drive to Survive, and most people involved in F1 acknowledge that, but also speak to the benefits of the series. But
Right.
Max is just kind of curmudgeon about it, and of course, this is the year where be anything but. But you could tell during press throughout the year he hated talking about all his collisions with Lewis. He hated all the drama. I just think he's a kind of shitty personality, honestly, for a superstar athlete. Like he just kind of like is a dick, you know.
Huh.
Versus Lewis, who's been famous for so long and is like super great about talking about himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and Lewis comes across just so. I mean, exactly like you want a champion to be. He's level-headed. He's
Yeah.
always calm. It seems like he's very likable, obviously, and I don't know if they touch on it in earlier seasons, but him being the only black racer in the
Yes.
whole thing is obviously something that I think is notable, and I wonder if it's a narrative that they choose not to actively talk about or just have
Yeah, it
in
was
the
bigger
past to
last
want to be a
season
dead
for
horse.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely interesting. I wanted to ask you, as a fan, obviously there's a lot that you're like, huh, I wonder why they didn't include that. But was there anything that you saw that you either didn't know about or you were like,
Yeah.
oh wow, that was great to see?
Yeah, so definitely, I think overall, I was definitely like noting stuff that I like was left out just because easier to remember. But there was like a moment or two that I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Didn't know that. And one of them actually randomly was the episode about Haas. Obviously,
Oh,
the last place team. They didn't develop the car. They went into 2021 expecting to be worse, because they just didn't try and be anything but worst, because they were saving money for this year, new regulations, all that stuff. But we still got an episode about Haas. I think it's good because Gunther Steiner, their principal, like Haas's version of Toto and Horner, Steiner is just like hilarious, and I find him so funny. And having him talk about Haas and how about their struggle, I'm always here for. But there was one moment, when Mazepin uh, was talking about the race in Russia, his home race, and he
Yeah.
talked about how like he saw the clouds, and he's like, when I would leave school, when I saw those clouds, it was always going to rain, so I knew that it was definitely going to rain, and thus we need the inter tires. And I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that Mazepin made the call there on the wets early, which definitely helped
Pretty
him.
That's pretty cool. Actually, I didn't note that in my brain, but that is an interesting point. Uh, I think that is one piece where it's a little bit hard for me to get fully into the sport, only because like if the car is just better, it just gives such an
Yeah,
advantage.
right. Yeah, that's the thing. It's kind of like you have like various battles, like your team at the front, your team right behind the front, your midfield, and then your back markers. And there's kind of like narratives and stories about all those individual components. I think just for me in general too, it's like seeing learning more about the sport once you watch it. Like for what gets me really excited is like seeing the strategy and trying to see if like can Lewis pull this out and win with Max in front? Can Lewis hold off Max, who's trying to do the same thing? Like kind of seeing how it all comes out. It's really a big game of chess
Right.
for teams, especially when teams are of equal playing field. And I think the Williams episode in season 4 did a good job of showing how teams that don't have the technical advantage can try and play their own game of chess to try and, score ground. And that was like a big thing that Jos Capito was like trying to do with Williams is like, our car isn't good enough on merit. We have to find other ways to try and score. And I think it's kind of like the whole package you kind of have to be absorbed in. But yeah, I mean, like it's not like a normal sport. Like I'm a Haas fan. I'm always a Haas fan because like, well, you can't just be a Haas fan because
Right.
Haas is just going to come in last this year. So obviously you need to have other things to pay attention to and like. So I think in general, F1 seems to, especially nowadays, with social media and stuff, F1's definitely a driver sport. People really like the personalities and stuff. Like Leclerc is like super popular, even though he hasn't won in 2 years. Like I think that kind of thing is the way you kind of have to approach it, because once you do it that way, it's like all kinds of other sport and in
Right.
documentary series, like all kinds of reality TV, personalities, drama, narrative, storyline. Like it's everything else you want is all there. You just kind of have to, I guess, find the way to grasp it. But
Yeah.
it
No.
is kind of unique. But I think
Uh,
what the reason I like it more than say like other forms of racing is that there's only 10 teams. There's only 20 drivers. There's a limited amount of people involved. And I think that's what's cool because you really kind of understand everyone there.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense to look at it that way, because when it comes down to it, sports are becoming more and more about the players and people being
Yeah.
fans of individual players rather than teams. So, definitely a fun watch. I don't know if I'm gonna be an F1 fan after this, but I'll probably be a fan of the series. So, I'm looking forward to whatever's next, and obviously hearing your updates on the weekends. When does the season start back up? Like a week or so, right?
Uh, this weekend. Yeah. So
Wow.
obviously you're not watching this one. Getting you're getting married this weekend, so you cannot
Yes.
watch the Bahrain Grand Prix. But yeah, it's kicking right off, and it goes until the end of the year, more or less. So I think that's the other thing too. It's like they only race like 2 or 3 times a month in season, so it's not like that hard to keep up with anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think season 4 overall, it wasn't quite as compelling for me. Not quite as sure if that's just because I know too much now, or that they just cut it in a different fashion. But overall, the one thing I wanted to see was how they treated the controversy at the end of the year at Abu Dhabi with Max and Lewis, and I thought they presented that fairly and objectively. Will Buxton, the journalist, just explaining broadly, out in the open, what happened and why it benefited Max and why it was
The
unusual. Like
only
they just
Max.
just completely said it is what it is. So I
Mhm.
liked how they treated that. The other thing I was looking forward to or interested in was how they were going to talk about Mazepin, because Nikita Mazepin is no longer in F1, and because of his father's ties to Putin as a Russian
Ah,
oligarch. And Mazepin was only really in F1 because of his dad's money. He was a bad driver in F2, not good enough to get to F1 on merit. He was there because of funds, and they had a whole big thing about how his dad was basically bankrolling the team last year for this year where Haas will get back up, back off the back foot. Mazepin's gone, and they just didn't acknowledge it at all, even though it happened about 2 weeks ago. So whatever. Um, that was the other thing I was looking forward to seeing how they treated it, just because it's a very unique situation to have
Yeah.
something like that come up. But I guess I just wanted to keep the political implications out of it, and maybe next year's season they'll actually note it. Who knows? But yeah,
I know. I know you said that they're doing this for golf. Could you ever see them doing anything like this for like one of the four major sports in the United States?
I don't
I mean,
think so. I
like,
think I think there's too many people.
yeah,
Like a baseball team. There's just too many people. Like and
right.
like they already do hard knocks with football. Like I don't
I
know
was
how
gonna
you
say
do
that.
something different. Like I think
Yeah,
big teams it doesn't quite fit.
yeah. No, it's just so compelling, and baseball needs something like this because
Mm,
I mean, we're they pretty much tried to kill themselves with this collective bargaining agreement fiasco
yeah.
and the lockout. So needs some sort of rejuvenating. I don't want to lose baseball, but uh, yeah, I think you're right. Big teams not meant for this style, but definitely check out Formula One Drive to Survive. Even if you're not a fan, I think you'll like it.